Welcome to the LDN radio show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. This show is sponsored by Dickson Chemist, who are the experts in LDN and associated treatments in the UK. Dickson Chemist are the most cost-effective for LDN in all forms within the UK and Europe, maintaining safety standards far in excess of what is required. Why would you choose to get your LDN from anywhere else? Call 0141 404 6545 today to speak to their LDN experts. Today my guest is pharmacist Stephen Dickson from Dickson's Chemist in Scotland. Thank you for joining us today, Stephen.
Hi Linda, it's great to be here.
So, you've been dispensing LDN, we think it's around 2006. I mean, it's an awfully long time. Back in the day, it was just the liquid LDN initially. I mean, could you tell us how far has LDN come on in that time? You know, how many more patients are taking LDN now in the UK, would you say?
Well, I think we've gone from a very, very niche product, which not very many doctors had heard of, not very many pharmacists had heard of, and if you went to a hospital in primary care, no one had heard of, to now. I mean, I think the majority of the medical profession, but we're pushing nearly 20 years later. If they haven't heard of it, I'd be surprised, because they've come across someone who has had LDN at some point, and that's very much more our experience now than it has been in the past. In the past, it was very much convincing doctors to look at it, to try and convince a GP to consider prescribing it, and now really the work that the LDN Research Trust has done, along with all the social media and all the positive feedback from patients, we really have had it's a lot easier now to, even if a GP, an individual NHS GP will not prescribe it, they certainly don't say no to it being prescribed privately. Mm-hmm. And when people turn up at the hospital or rheumatoid arthritis appointments or MS appointments, the nurses know, the clinicians know about it, and it's far easier for us to first have those conversations with them. I mean, it did used to be it was almost adversarial at the start, because they were wondering, what on earth is this, and what are these crazy people doing? And it's now gone from, oh well, it's great that you're providing, it's great that you're able to provide this private service so inexpensively. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the number of patients has gone from 2006, 7, maybe 100 to we're in the tens of thousands of patients now who've had LDN. It recently got to the stage where our database that holds scanned copies of all of the prescriptions that we've ever received exceeded the maximum limits for the SQL server. Yeah. I don't really know what that means. I have an IT guy for that, but I know they were somewhat surprised.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, yeah. Well, because of the records we have to keep in order to make sure that we're legal. So you go to a pharmacy normally and it's just a few lines of text, but for every individual event that's for something like this, which is unlicensed, and in the special section, there's several sheets of paper plus that are scanned, and then every interaction and every prescription is generated and stored as a separate file, so it all adds up.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, when I first started in 2003, I was among 400 people that were taking LDN, and not many people even knew about LDN. So it really has come on such a long way. Now, there are people in other countries, especially America, where they still compound in their pharmacies. I vaguely remember when I was a little girl in a pharmacy, seeing all these glass jars with red liquid, blue, green. I was fascinated.
I have a number of those in my living room.
Have you really?
Yes, those glass jars from the the 20s and 30s.
Well, I'm not quite that old, thank you. and the pestle and mortar and everything. Now, the Americans don't understand that we have different rules and laws and regulations with compounded products. That would be a really good start to explain to people when people are on the internet talking to others and saying, well, why doesn't your pharmacy do it? Because we're not allowed to. So could you explain that for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, so what you're describing with a mortar and pestle was literally what I did right at the start in 2000 and whatever it was, 2006, 2007, for a couple of patients, to see what happened at the direct individual request of a doctor. And that was Dr. Tom, back then. And that was literally crushing tablets using a mortar and pestle and then doing something with them based on a formula. But that's okay, and it's called Chemist Nostrum's regulations, and you can do that for small batches. But pharmacies in America are much more set up to be able to produce things like capsules and tablets, etc., because the nature of medicine over there is very, very different. And as you pointed out, the regulations are very different. Because we're quite lucky in the UK to have the National Health Service, and no matter what you may say or think about the current state of the National Health Service, actually the existence of that has required standardisation, and also across the group or across the whole network of pharmacies and doctors, vaguely the same level of service and quality is found. So with regards to unlicensed specials, which is what an LDN product is, there are some rules that you have to follow in the UK that are somewhat different. And it's all about showing where the product came from, what the provenance of the product was, how that was manufactured, and how that was then transferred to the patient so that you can get it back if something went wrong with that batch. And in the and while it's okay to, in America you would maybe have a pharmacist making capsules by hand, unless you're very, very, very accurate, the variance per capsule would be greater than would be allowable than we would allow in the UK. So we would expect something that is being given, like for example, the capsules of LDN that we make at the moment are made in very, very large batches, by machinery, so that every single capsule is the same every time. And that means that you don't have one capsule that potentially has 4.3 milligrams in it and one capsule that has 4.6 milligrams of LDN in it. So, and that would be, within the normal tolerances of doing it by hand. And who's to say that that's not okay? But we do find that certainly in the UK we are held to a lot higher standards than some places in America. Now it's different in all different areas of America are federally controlled differently, and it's great that we have so many pharmacists that we know who have invested in the equipment and can do great things over there. But there are also people who are not necessarily following those standards, and that's something which is being dealt with. I believe of talking to Mark in Chicago about how the regulations are being kind of brought into line a bit with the United Kingdom, how we look at it. Basically, from our point of view, when you're going into the unlicensed special world, it's not just the same as sticking a label in a box. You have to go through and think about everything from a safety perspective and look at all the processes that get that unlicensed product to the patient. Mainly because you want it to be right, but also because liability is split 50-50 between the prescriber and the pharmacy dispensing it, which I don't believe is exactly the same in the rest of the world. So, from our perspective, the most interesting thing that's happened to us recently is, having to create new formulations for people. So, we started off just making a 1 milligram per ml liquid, and then we've been able to make batches of capsules in large enough quantities in 3 and 4.5s, and to enable them to be cost effective. But we've also then been able to have sublingual drops manufactured as well, to give everybody a range of ways of taking LDN that suits them. And I think between those sort of 3 main methods, I mean, we do sometimes make creams and things, but it's reasonably rare compared to the oral versions. actually most people can find a way to take LDN that suits them using those three different main methods. So in order to keep us compliant, we work with a third party. Probably you will have seen this if anyone has ever watched one of the videos of the LDN conferences. John from Thistle Pharma, he's incredibly good at the regulatory point, and we've been working with him since pretty much the beginning as well, and his companies to make sure that the supply chain for LDN is continued into the UK. And we'll be actually, with his help, we're very, very lucky right now because we've been able to stockpile basically 12 months supply of LDN because we're worried about the impact of Brexit, etc. So we have enough Naltrexone API at our manufacturing partners in order to get us through pretty much till next December. Hopefully by that point, most of the problems will have gone. And one of the things that we've been saying to people is don't leave it to the last minute, because even if we have that stock, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can use it, because you can only call off batches of it at a time. So make sure you don't, when you have 10 capsules left, make sure you reorder it and you don't wait until you've none. And I know that's common in NHS land, because you can just walk into any pharmacy and you generally have it. But actually, that's not the case with LDN, always. So make sure that you don't run out. It's the same with liquid. We're saying to people, when you're halfway through a bottle, if you're ordering it manually, just order another one to make sure you never run out. And we know with the unopened liquid has 12 months expiry, so there's no problem with it sitting in your fridge.
So with the liquid, I know formulations have changed over the years. What is the ingredients in it at the moment?
So basically, it's sugar-free syrup and some glycerin, which helps with the flavour to mask the horrible taste of the naltrexone molecule itself. A couple of natural preservatives, some natural colourings, a few other bits and pieces, which escape my mind entirely at this moment because it's after 7 o'clock at night. But and naltrexone itself. So there's no lactose. Mainly the question we have is there any lactose in your liquid? And there is not any lactose in your liquid now. And that has been the case for quite a while. So it hasn't really made any difference to people, but it's something people ask the question. So the amount is so there's the answer.
Thank you. So some people say, why is it Dickson's only do the Abercel filler? I would prefer to have XYZ. And for the reasons that you pointed out, that to get it at an affordable price, you have to have it made in bulk. So it's not the same as going into a chemist and saying, I want calcium carbonate, I want a probiotic, I want whatever. You have to put in an order for that bulk order with one filler.
Absolutely, Linda. We can make anything you like. Anything you want at all, we can have made for you in capsule form. If you want calcium carbonate, we can have it, but you have to be willing to pay for it. Because it would mean that someone physically has to go and reformulate that, clean the machine, and then just do a batch of just 28 or 56 or 84 capsules. That might take someone a full day. So the full daily rate for a human being of that quality, is going to be a couple of £100 before you even get started. So an individual one run of a special request like that is possible, but it ends up costing far more than is reasonable when there really is no evidence to show that there's anything better or worse. Abercel, the microcrystalline cellulose or magnesium stearate that we use, seems to have wonderful properties for dissolution, and really the formula hasn't changed in a very long time with the capsules, so that's made we've not had any issues with those. So, but the thing is, if someone has a problem with with something to do with the capsules, we have another couple of methods that people can try. And the vast majority of people do very well on the liquid or the sublingual drops, and they really just move to capsules for convenience because they don't want to carry a bottle of liquid around on holiday or whatever, and that's fine. So.
And do you foresee in the future having made sterile eye drops. I mean, is that something that is a possibility, or would that also work out too expensive?
So eye drops have to be made sterile. So we have had a number of requests for this, and we have priced it on each individual occasion, and it's come back more than people were willing to pay. So again, these things everything is possible. It's just with enough money, anything's possible. But actually, it's not been something that we've been able to have done in a sterile way. Now, if you're in America, for example, some pharmacies in the community have aseptic laboratories that are sterile, because unlike in the community pharmacies can make, for example, bags of sterile chemotherapy. Now, that would not be done in the community here because of the way the regulatory framework is. There's the MHRA oversees a whole aseptic division, and they have to meet all sorts of standards that are not, that are much higher than you would have in a normal pharmacy. So it's not that we couldn't make it; it's that I couldn't comply with the regulations in the store. Although I have some of the I have like a free flow cabinet, I have all the kind of technology, but maintaining the licenses for that and the inspections for the 2 or 3 bottles that we would make a year would not be financially viable. So it's not. But if someone is desperate to have LDN eye drops, then we can look at having them made in the UK. But I mean, we could we can always look at an option. If there's someone out there who's desperate to try LDN eye drops, get them to talk to us, but just be aware that it won't be £20. The same as the other things.
Yes. I mean, if in the future you had so many people requesting eye drops, then it might be something that you could have done on a larger scale, like you do the capsules. But
it's all about scale. I mean, it's all about scale in the UK. It's basically, if you imagine, you have to book time in a laboratory that's meeting all the standards. So that's really that's a limiting factor. It's not that things aren't possible. It's that the booking of the time in the laboratory and doing the formulation is the thing that costs the money. So yeah, it's not that it's not that we don't want to help. It's just not commercially sensible or reasonable for some people. I would say though, anybody who's had eye problems who's tried oral LDN does seem to do just as well. So we've had a few American patients who've moved to the UK or Canadian patients. I actually think it was Canadian patients who were using Naltrexone eye drops for I think it was glaucoma or something. But they moved on to the oral one. I think they did all right. So I can't really remember the full details because I never followed it through because of the cost.
The other thing is having pharmaceutical grade products that are made to a standard and they're regulated and checked and tested, etc., etc. And I've been asked several times in this last month that you now do CBD. Now, we know that CBD can be obtained from just about anywhere, and not everywhere has the highest of quality, and some of them have the THC in it. For those people who ask me all these questions about CBD, I am not a CBD expert. Could you tell us from a pharmacist's point of view about CBD and LDN working together?
Oh, yes. Well, this came up a number of years ago at one of the LDN conferences. But some of the doctors were using the 2 molecules currently and getting great results in some of their patients. So it's something that we have actually been doing cannabinoids for a very long time, because MS patients were one of the first patients to be allowed to have Stabilise prescribed for spasticity in MS. We've been seeing an awful lot of prescriptions for Stabilise over the years, so we developed quite a lot of internal knowledge about it. But going on from there, I mean, basically the same as I just said applies to the CBD market. You can Google my name and you'll find all sorts of articles. I've been reasonably vocal about this. But food supplements are not don't meet any of the standards at all that we expect. So, to give you an idea, I visited a supplement manufacturer who shall remain nameless, who was trying to sell us CBD, and it was being manufactured basically in a garage with open skylights above it, with no temperature regulation, and by someone without a degree in a garage. Now, besides where they were making the CBD oil, they also stored mowers, to cut the grass. So, I mean, this is the... and this is beautiful packaging, looked amazing. It was one of the premium products on the market, and actually it didn't meet any standards at all. So all you really need to make CBD in the UK right now is a food hygiene certificate, and you can obtain one of those online in about 30 minutes. So it's not a terribly complicated thing to do, because it's fallen into this kind of hole between Sativex, which is a licensed medicine and a controlled drug, and food supplements that contain cannabinoids, which are basically the same class legally as bread or chocolate. So what that has meant is over the last couple of years, that the growth in the number of people trying to capitalise on this market has been ridiculous. And in fact, because we had to find a supply chain that worked, that was the same quality as, for example, LDN, and made all the same standards, because we have doctors wanting to prescribe CBD on its own, we had to look to basically the same supply chain that produced LDN and go through the whole same process of what does this look like, where does it come from, what do the standards need to be met, how does that repeatable, is it always going to be the same, does bacteria grow in it, and all the questions that we had to ask for LDN right back at the start. We had to do that entire project all over again, and that was about 2 years ago. I think we completed that. So basically, as the outcome from that, patients can get prescribed Canadol, which is what we've called our specific supply chain, Canadol and Canadol FS, through the usual prescribers for LDN. And we formed a group called the UK Cannabis Clinic, where we brought together a whole load of specialists and people who are experienced in using cannabinoids in various conditions, and we were able to provide them with dosing information, so for what worked in patients over who have had it over the years, and what to try. Now, we're not saying it actually does anything, because it's a food supplement, therefore we can't make any claims that it does any medical products whatsoever. It doesn't, because it's a food supplement and the same class as bread, you can't say that bread cures cancer. In the same way, you can't say CBD cures cancer, which of course I don't think it does. But it certainly, in some of our patients, they've reported when they're taking CBD along with LDN, they've reported that they get a much better result when they use what has come through the supply chain that we've made, rather than something they've bought in a high street store somewhere. What I would say is, in the UK, we're gradually rolling out the UK Cannabis Clinic and the Canadol supply chain into community pharmacies locally. So there are now a good few hundred community pharmacies in local areas who have been trained by our prescribers, who have been trained on how to use it in multiple conditions and what to give. So there's if you're looking for a local person to talk to, your local pharmacist might well have the Canadol brand in stock, and if not, you can get it from any of their suppliers. The main thing really is that we discovered early on that the cannabinoids interface very strongly with an enzyme in your liver called cytochrome P450. And cytochrome P450 is responsible for a great number of drugs and the way they are metabolized and broken down. So everything from very simple antidepressants to painkillers. If you take CBD and you're on these other drugs, you can be putting your life at risk. For example, fentanyl, which is a painkiller people use a lot, or OxyContin or oxycodone. If you were to take CBD alongside that, you could actually push yourself into toxicity and end up in hospital or worse. And there's quite a number of drugs. I think we're at 200 and something so far, where there's special guidelines for using CBD at the same time. And that's really important, because a lot of people are buying these kind of cannabinoid products in market stalls or health food shops or whatever, are buying it from someone who knows nothing about it, who hasn't looked at the supply chain behind it. And I can say that, having tested a large number of products on the market, trying to find basically trying to find somebody who was doing it properly, not being terribly successful. The overall, if you think about it from a point of view that if you buy a bottle that says it's 10 milligrams per mil, and you use that 1 week and it works brilliantly, and then you buy the same bottle the next week, and it's not been made the same way, or it's made from a different batch of hemp or something, then it might not work the next week because it might not have the right amount in it. And any, in fact, and in fact we had a situation where a friend of mine with a number of pharmacies was selling a product, and it was tested, and they discovered that there was no CBD in the oil whatsoever.
Dear.
And that was being sold for £30 a bottle. So and that's just because of the way that the market is. There's no one regulating it. Now, that will change, I think, over time. And I think after Brexit, the MHRA will have more. They'll not be sort of governed by the EU. So I think they will have the ability to step in and place a bit more control over CBD market. But right now, I would say to anybody who's considering CBD alongside LDN, that absolutely do not buy something off the internet, especially if you are on other medication. I mean, the phone rings multiple times a day with us, and it's people saying, "I'm buying this specific one off the internet," and they send us the link. Can you tell us about whether it's safe with all of my 20 medicines? And it's not that we're trying to be unhelpful. It's that we don't know what's in it. We can't. I can show you 100 test results for multiple products, none of which were said that they were what they said they were. And these are products that were, everything from £20 to £200 a bottle, and they weren't even close to what they say they were. So when we are getting it, when our patients get it prescribed, it is exactly what it says on the bottle, and it's always the same every time, and it comes from the same factory that makes all the LDN. Same people, same QP process. So we know that process works. We understand what that looks like. We understand the quality that you get out of that process and the effort. And it took a lot longer to get there because we were trying to do it properly instead of quickly. But yeah, so it's for our patients.
So THC, do people need THC with their CBD?
Most people need THC with their CBD. Standardise is a licensed product that's on the market, and they can access it, no problem, through our standard supply chain. There are a number of cases where you would need to, where our clinicians do want to add in a small amount of THC, and that generally is there's a paper showing there's been some improvement in brain tumours. There's a couple of adenomas, but there seems to be some improvement using a bit of THC. But it's always not very much, and it's in the minority compared to the amount of CBD they want to give. So our clinicians often will say to people, "Look, I want you to try the purified just cannabidiol on its own first. I will get on, and then they'll add in other things." And one of the things we see an awful lot of is our oncology patients. And I mean, I never really thought when we started LDN for MS back in the day that maybe a third of our current workload are very complicated patients who have, stage 4, breast cancer, or, they're basically things that NHS has said, enough, we've given up, there's nothing else we can do for you. And they go to places like Patricia Peat or Care Oncology, and then they make recommendations for, dozens of drugs that they go on as well as LDN. So things like metformin and dipyridamole and mebendazole and high doses of statins, along with the LDN, and invariably we're seeing a large number of those patients also get some degree of cannabinoid as well. And the feedback we're getting from all of our consultants is definitely that they're getting a far more repeatable response from the supply chain that we've created in the cannabis product than they were using anything that they were buying elsewhere, or getting elsewhere. So, I mean, certainly as well, there's been some traction in hospices where people are going in with something unknown, like a bottle of some sort of cannabis oil. Now, bearing in mind that depending on how you make it, it might not have the right amount of CBD in it, but if it has pretty much any THC in it that's measurable, it's not legal in the UK market. And what we did, when we did some tests, we found that a large number by a very, very large number of the products that were on the market had levels of THC in them. But if you were stopped, for example, driving a car, you could be arrested because you'd have too much THC in your blood.
Mm.
And that's not a great place to be, because obviously it's putting you at an undue risk for probably no clinical benefit from the actual amount that's there. Enough to fail a drugs test, but not enough to do anything terribly exciting. So, yeah.
Well, it's just amazing, from where you started, crushing a tablet, to where you are now. I know it might have seemed a long time to you, but it's not really that long a time, is it? It's not that many years.
Well, I think we've done an awful lot. I mean, we've gone from it being a very, very challenging environment where it was very difficult for people to get it prescribed, really for it to be a very fast turnaround service. You get in contact. We have so many trained prescribers now who are specialists in individual areas. We can get you to the right person reasonably quickly through our partners at Clinic 158 or through ourselves. If you need to see someone in person, we now know somebody, pretty much all over the areas, and with your help as well, often we can direct people to go to the right place. And that makes a big difference, because being able to access the product quickly and reasonably, and making sure that you're not paying over the odds for it, and you're being looked after at the very, within the confines of the requirements in the law, that's been quite challenging to do, and I think that's, we're there and it's done, it's working great, and that's, if you remember a few years ago, there were 6-8 week waiting lists, to get a consultation for. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it's now 2 to 3 days, maybe a week if it's really, really, really busy, or somebody's on holiday, that's quite impressive. You've got to bear in mind as well, during that time, a lot of the original prescribers have either retired or are no longer doing it, or moved on to other things. Mm-hmm. So we've had to absorb a lot of other people's caseload and take that into, and understand what that all looks like, and make that all work for the patients as well. So that has been quite an interesting journey as well. But yes, it's something that if anybody is obviously listening to this as a patient of ours and or Clinic 158, they'll know that we do tend to run about like crazy and do everything possible to help, rather than be difficult. We want to try and make sure that you get the right dose and the product as quickly as possible. Even down to this year, actually, this is the very first year I think we've been 3 days before Christmas. We all looked at each other and thought, everything's finished.
Well, that's the first.
Normally it's Christmas Eve and there's somebody crying in a corner,
That's amazing.
I think you get better at things as you do them more often, and you do more of it.
Mm-hmm.
But,
well, you have some fantastic staff, I must admit. Very conscientious, very friendly, very, very helpful. And we've run out of time, and I would just like to end it by saying thank you, Stephen, for everything that you do. This show is sponsored by Dickson Chemist, who are the experts in LDN and associated treatments in the UK. Dickson Chemist are the most cost-effective for LDN in all forms within the UK and Europe, maintaining safety standards far in excess of what is required. Why would you choose to get your LDN from anywhere else? Call 0141 404 6545 today to speak to their LDN experts. New for 2020, our LDN radio shows will be available on Spotify and iTunes. They will also be transcribed and added to our website, ldnresearchtrust.org. Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.